Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including injury updates for a few teams from around the NHL, and some trade rumors involving teams like the Seattle Kraken, New Jersey Devils, and the Edmonton Oilers. Let's get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. I would usually kick things off with a signing that has happened recently or in the past few days, but there have been no signings in the past few days, so there's nothing really to talk about there. So we'll get right into the injury updates. I'll start with the Detroit Red Wings. The injuries have been really brutal to the Red Wings this week. Now, they have placed two of their top 7 defensemen on injury reserve over the past little while, as they placed both Olli Maatta and Robert Hagg both on IR. Now, Hagg has an undisclosed injury right now, and he's going to miss some time. There's no clear timetable about when he can return. I don't expect him to be out too long, but he is going to miss a little bit of time. Hagg's a good third pair defenseman for the Red Wings, and he's not the most point-producing defenseman out there, but he can put up some points, so losing a key depth defenseman like that is not ideal, but they do have guys like Osterley and Wallman who could fill in the role in the short term, so it's not too big of a loss, but losing a body on the defensive end is never a good thing. And then the more significant one is that defenseman Olli Maatta was also been placed on injury reserve, and he's going to miss some time with an injury. Now, there's no clarification on how long he's going to be out either, but it does sound like it might be a little bit, probably a couple weeks maybe. I'm not sure exactly the extent of the injury, but definitely going to miss at least a little bit of time. Maatta's actually done really well this year. He signed a one-year contract in the offseason to come play with the Red Wings, and he's really done well. He's been working in a really good top 4 role up to this point this year, so he's done really good for the Detroit Red Wings, and I think that they'll definitely be missing him for the extended period of time he's out. Some more other injuries that have happened recently for the Red Wings are significant and could end up being really bad for them. They have lost Dylan Larkin and Filip Hronek in their last 2 games. Hronek is obviously being their best offensive defenseman this year, even more than Moritz Seider, and he took a huge hit in yesterday's game against the Minnesota Wild from Ryan Reeves, and he's probably going to be missed some time with a concussion. There's no real update on that injury yet, but he's probably going to miss some time. Dylan Larkin has a hand injury. He's going to be probably out for a couple of weeks, probably until after the Christmas break. So some injuries in the Red Wings locker room. We already know that they have a lot of injuries already with guys like Marc Pysyk, Robbie Fabry, Filip Zadina, Matt Luff, all out, and Virana on the players' assistant program. So the Red Wings are really banged up right now. They did end up getting one player back, though, as they did activate Elmer Soderblom off of injury reserve, and he did get back into game action in the last few games. Soderblom is a forward, so getting him back will help the offensive group. I know they still have guys like Bertuzzi, Zadina, Fabry out, so getting another healthy body on the forward group is good, and he can play third pair minutes if need be. So good for the Red Wings to get Soderblom back, but the injuries continue to get hit with guys like Larkin, Hronek, non-injury reserve right now, but do look like they may miss some time, and then Maatta and Hagg being placed in injury reserve. So the injury bug keeps them by in Detroit. Hopefully they can get these players back, as they're starting to fall a little bit out of the playoff race, and if they don't get some more wins soon, they're going to start falling really fast. Over in Montreal, they've also had a few injury updates, as they got 2 players back, but they've also lost a couple players due to injury. Now, we saw Cole Caulfield get an injury scare a few days ago. He was able to play in yesterday's game, so the Caulfield injury is not too big of a worry for the Montreal Canadiens at this point, so it's good that Caulfield was able to get right back into game action. But there were a couple of other guys who were placed on injury reserve over the past week and a half for the Canadiens. About a week ago, we saw that Brendan Gallagher was placed on injury reserve. He's going to miss probably about another week and a half due to his injury, so not too much. He's probably going to be back just after the Christmas break would be my guess, but definitely losing one of their leaders in the locker room for some time is not an ideal situation for Montreal. Gallagher's a really good locker room player for this team, and one of the leaders on the ice, as he is an alternate captain, so definitely a bad loss for the Canadiens. He hasn't been putting up too many points, and had been more of a bottom 6 forward in the early parts of this year, but still, losing a guy like Gallagher for any significant period of time is not ideal, so hopefully he can get back after the Christmas break. We also saw Sean Monahan being placed on injury reserve, and he's going to miss the next 3 weeks with a lower body injury. Now, that's going to hurt the Canadiens a bit, They definitely have gotten some forwards back, but Monahan's actually done quite well. He was acquired in the offseason from the Calgary Flames, and he's done quite well in Montreal in his first season with Montreal. So losing him for a significant period of time is not an ideal situation for Montreal. But the Canadiens do have enough centers and forwards in particular to make do without Monahan for the foreseeable future. And on the defensive end, well, they haven't placed him on IR yet. David Savard is also expected to miss at least 3 weeks due to an upper body injury. Now, Savard has been a top 4 defenseman this year, playing the early parts of the season with a guy like Caden Gooley. He had been more of a second, third pair defenseman in the more recent games that the Canadiens have played, but still, he's a really good defender. Not the best, and definitely not one of the better ones in Montreal right now, but he's definitely a good defenseman. So losing him will definitely allow one of the younger guys to come into the lineup and play a little bit more of a prominent role for the Canadiens. And hopefully Savard can come back soon, because as much as Savard hasn't been the best and probably isn't one of the top-end defensemen in Montreal, he's still one of the good veterans on that team. So losing a guy like him is not ideal. So hopefully guys like Savard and Monahan can get back soon. They're probably going to be out until early January, would be my guess. So hopefully those two can come back. But they did end up activating Jonathan Drouin and Mike Hoffman off of injury reserve. Now, for these two, they are both currently heavily in the rumor mill right now. There's a lot of speculation that one or both of these guys could be moved by the trade deadline. We know Drouin's in the final year of his deal, and Hoffman has 2 years left on his deal, but getting these two back is huge. Both don't have too much trade value right now, so with guys like Gallagher and Monahan out, it's going to give these guys a little bit more of an opportunity to prove that they still have some good offensive capabilities left in their game. I know Hoffman, I think, is still the most likely to be traded, given the fact that he's still put up some pretty nice point totals this year. Drouin hasn't put up too many points in this year so far, so getting those two in the lineup to play bomb six roles is good. Hopefully these two can continue to up their game and hopefully play well enough to be traded at the trade deadline. So that's all for Montreal. Let's go over to the Ottawa Senators, as the Sens have recently placed Tim Stutzle and Mathieu Joseph on injury reserve, and both guys will be missing some time. Now, Stutzle suffered an upper body injury earlier this week. He's only going to miss about a week, so he could easily be back just after the Christmas break, but still, losing their top line center for the next 2-3 games before the Christmas break is really going to be a difficult task for the Ottawa Senators. They've already lost top center Josh Norris to injury, so losing Stutzle really thins out their center group right now, but he should be back in the very near future, so it's not too bad of a placement for the Ottawa Senators. Hopefully Stutzle can get back in the very near future and help the Sens team. Joseph was placed on IR last weekend, and he's probably going to miss about a week and a half due to injury. So he probably could get into game action sometime between Christmas and the New Year. It's quite possible. Joseph has been mostly a third-line forward for this year, but he has played really well, so losing him is not an ideal situation. And then while he has been placed in IR, they also have Tyler Mott out right now with an injury, and he's going to miss about a week. So, once again, not a significant amount of time they're going to lose Mott for. Once again, he's been a good third-line forward for them, and he should be able to get back in between the Christmas break and the New Year. So, 3 guys who are going to be out for the next week, 2 weeks maybe, and for the time being, with guys already like Josh Norris out due to injury, that forward group looks very thin. For the next 3-4 games, they're going to have to make do with their AHL players and call them up, and hopefully those players can fill in the roles, at least to some extent, until Stutzle, Mott, and Joseph can get back. Over in Colorado, they've had a few activations. We've talked about them last week that they're really banged up. They had McKinnon out due to injury. They had Lehkonen out due to injury. Nichushkin was out. Girard, Byram. There was a ton of injuries on this Avalanche team, but they have gotten a little bit more healthy. Lehkonen was never placed on injury reserve. He's now back after missing a few games due to his injury. Nichushkin, after missing probably well over a month due to his injury, has now been activated and has gone into a few games recently after missing time due to an injury. And then Shane Bowers, who was an AHL call-up when they started running into injury problems, has been activated and sent down to the minors after he has recovered from his injury. So, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, those are 2 huge pieces. They have been key studs in the top 6 this year, especially with a guy like Landeskog being out for the entire of the season so far. So getting Nichushkin back, who was on a really good tear early in the season before suffering his injury, and LeClaire, who has definitely really stepped into a second pair role for the Avalanche. Getting these two guys back is huge. They still have McKinnon and Landeskog out, so giving those two guys back, they have been playing mostly on the top line since coming back because of all the injuries, but two key top six pieces back for the Avalanche is a really big boost for them, and hopefully they can help the Avalanche continue to improve in the playoff race and continue to be a good dominant team in the Central. Over with Bowers, I don't think it's really much of a surprise he's been sent down. He got injured in his first ever NHL game, so the kid hasn't had much NHL time, and it makes sense that, at least for the next little while, given the fact he just came off of injury reserve, he goes back to the AHL, plays a few games, gets his feet back under him, and then if they still have some injury problems, maybe he could be a call-up in a couple of weeks. But definitely getting Bowers back gives them a little bit more depth in their organization, and getting Nichushkin and Lehkonen back gives them a little bit more offensive weapons in the forward group, especially in that top six. So getting these three back are huge for the Avalanche, and hopefully these three can help the Avalanche climb the standings. They haven't been as dominant as they were last year, but they're still a really good team. So getting a few more healthy bodies back will definitely help this team become a lot more dangerous. And lastly, over with the Pittsburgh Penguins, they have recently placed Jeff Petrie on long-term injury reserve, and he's going to miss the next month due to an injury. Now, Petrie has an upper body injury, and his timeline is really unknown right now, but given the fact he was placed on long-term injury reserve, he's going to miss at least 24 days or 10 games due to an injury. So it's quite safe to say he's not going to be back until, at the very least, mid-January, probably maybe even later. So big blow to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know Petrie has done really well this year in a top four role, his first year with the Penguins after being acquired in the offseason. He's done quite well, and I think he's fitting really well with the Pittsburgh team. Now, the only thing is that, well, he is a key piece to that Pens top four, and it's going to be really hard to replace him. The Pens do have a decent amount of depth on the blue line. They have guys like Ty Smith and Marc Friedman in the minors who could come up and play bottom pairing roles, and maybe a guy like Pierre-Olivier Joseph moves into top four. So I don't think it's really the worst case scenario for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's a really bad thing for the Pens, definitely, to lose the top four defensemen for some time, but they have the depth to work around it for the time being. So hopefully Petrie can get back in the near future. Him being placed on injury reserve is not going to be a good thing for the Penguins. Hopefully he gets back around mid-January, and hopefully it doesn't linger on too long. But definitely Petrie being lost to injury reserve is a big blow. And then on top of that, well, he hasn't been placed on injury reserve yet. Jason Zucker is apparently going to miss some significant time with the injury, and he's going to be out week to week with the injury. Now, Zucker has been a good middle six forward for the Penguins this year, really done well. He's in a contract year trying to prove he can still be a good, consistent middle six forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and losing him is going to be a big blow. The Pens do have some good pieces who could be placed back into lineup, like a Kapanen or a Heinen, who have been rotating as healthy scratches. So they have some depth and enough to be okay without Zucker for the time being, but Zucker being lost is not ideal. There's no real timeline for his thing, it's just week to week right now, so it's really likely that he'll miss at least until the end of the Christmas break, if not longer, probably maybe into the new year. So big blows for the Penguins on the forward and defensive core. Hopefully Petrie and Zucker can get back in the lineup in the near future, as the Penguins are right in the middle of a heated race in the Metro Division for playoff spots with guys like the Canes, the Islanders, and the Rangers, and they need all the wins they can get. So hopefully these two don't take too long to recover, and they can get back and help this Penguins team continue to contend for a playoff spot. And that's all we have for the injury updates. Now let's go over to the trade rumor part of the video, as we are going to start with the Edmonton Oilers. Now last week, Jesse Puljujarvi went out and said that he hadn't been playing overly well, and he was really wondering if he can really be a consistent NHL forward. He had not done too well this year. Last year and the year before, he had done actually quite well. He had looked like he was starting to gain some confidence and play really well. I know a couple of years ago in the shortened season, he had 25 points, so it wasn't overly good. It was about a point every 2 games, so it's not too bad. Last year, he actually did quite well, putting up 14 goals and 36 points in 65 games, and he looked like a completely different player, but the Oilers did have some cap problems, so he was definitely a really hot topic in the offseason about possibly being traded. but he did end up signing a 1-year, $3 million deal with the Oilers, and has since not looked really good. Currently only has 1 goal and 6 points in 30 games with the Oilers, and has been playing mostly on the third line with guys like Dylan Holloway and Ryan McLeod. So it's safe to say that Puljujarvi's definitely taken a drop right now, and that's why there hasn't been a trade yet. I think the Oilers are definitely trying to move him. There have been a lot of talks over the past week since that came out that the Oilers definitely have been trying to move him and would like to accommodate a trade for the young guy. But with his production and his $3 million cap hit, there really isn't much appetite. So there was a rumor a little while ago that maybe the Ducks and Oilers would swap forwards, and that the Ducks would get Puljujarvi and the Oilers would get Comtois. Now, I know that one of the big sticking points for the Oilers has been that they want to create as much cap space as they can. They will be creating a little bit in a trade like that, as Comtois only has a slight bit above $2 million in his contract this year, and Puljujarvi has $3 million, so they'd be getting at least $1 million in cap space. They could even get more if they could convince Anaheim to retain some salary. But I definitely think that it's a possibility, but I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be the right move for Edmonton. I know Edmonton's really been trying to get as much cap space as they can. I mean, if they can maybe convince Anaheim to retain $500,000 to $750,000 off of Comtois' contract, maybe that works. If they're only getting Comtois at like $1.25 million. So I think it's a possibility. I think Comtois, another guy who started out well a couple of years ago and has trailed off. I mean, 2 years ago in that shortened season, he led the Ducks in points with 16 goals and 33 points in 55 games. And then last year he fell off a bit, started becoming a bottom six forward and healthy scratch sometimes. This year he had been a bottom six forward. He missed some time due to injury. He currently has 5 goals and 5 points in 19 games, so he has missed some time due to injury. And he hasn't looked too good, not to the point where he was in the shortened season, but definitely he can still benefit from a fresh start. I think that Comtois is a very likely candidate to be traded, and I think that a swap could work. For the Oilers, they could get a good middle six forward who could help them produce. I think in the right situation, Comtois could still be that good 33-point player that we saw in the shortened season. For the Ducks, they could get, as much as it is probably a little bit more expensive to get Puljujarvi, they could get a good top six forward that could work with a guy like Zucker or McTavish in the future. And maybe some more playing time for Puljujarvi would do him good and show that he can still be a good point-producing forward. So definitely does seem like this is a possibility. In my opinion, I could see that move happening. I think Comtois and Puljujarvi both need fresh starts. They're both pending RFAs, so they're going to be RFAs at the end of the year. And it might just make sense for the Ducks and Oilers to swap these two young players. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And definitely with Puljujarvi not playing well recently and the Oilers trying to move him, he's definitely a player we should keep an eye on in the coming weeks and months leading up to the trade deadline. Next, over to the Seattle Kraken. Now, there hasn't been any reports on this. This is something that I've just been thinking about. And because the Seattle Kraken, at the trade deadline, go out and acquire defensemen. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk recently that their face-off percentage has not been doing too well, and they could look to try and get a center, and I think that's another possibility. But given their forward depth, I think it's not as likely as maybe getting a defenseman. If you look at their forward group, the off-season acquisitions of guys like Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand have made that offense amazingly lethal, as well as the young rookie Matty Beniers. So you got those three. They just acquired Eli Tolvanen off of waivers. So with their forward group, it does seem like maybe they're okay for now. I think if they were to get like a third-line center who could maybe win some face-offs for them, that would be a possibility, I think, for sure. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they went out to get a defenseman. I know right after the expansion draft when they were in, and some points last year, there was talk about them going out and acquiring a big-name right-shot defenseman. There were some that linked him to Morgan Riley before he signed with the Maple Leafs. There were some that thought last year that he could be a good fit for John Klingberg. He ended up signing with the Ducks. So could they go out and get a forward? I think it's possible. At the very least, a depth forward. Because as we've seen over the past few weeks, when Alexiak was suspended and injured, they had to call up Gustav Olofsson to be like their 6th, 7th defenseman at some points. And given the fact that Olofsson's a good defenseman, but can they really run like a playoff run if they were to make the playoffs with like a Olofsson-Borgen third pair? I don't think it's very likely. Plus, they also don't have a legit superstar defenseman in their AHL. They have a couple of young guys like a Riker Evans or Ty Nelson who could definitely work their way into being good, maybe top 4 defensemen in the future. but there's no players who could jump into the lineup in the next year or two and be impactful defensemen. So I think there's really a possibility that the Kraken could go out and acquire a defenseman. I know if they were looking for like just a rental for this year, maybe they could look like a guy like Klingberg or Shattenkirk in Anaheim. Both are good players. I know Shattenkirk's actually played a lot in the third pair. Maybe that would make sense for the Kraken. You have the Capitals. They've really gone back in the playoff race, but if they do start to slide again, I think we could see a defenseman or two traded. You have guys like Orlov and Jensen there, who could be really interesting to the Kraken. In Arizona, I'm not sure they have the assets to take on a Jacob Chikrin. I think they still don't have all the assets that a regular team would have to pull off a Chikrin trade, but they could, I think, maybe take like a Gostisbehere or a Stetcher, who could play a good second pair roles with the team. So I think they do have a few options when it comes to an unrestricted free agent. I think acquiring a defenseman could definitely help their team. And if they were looking for a younger, maybe player who could grow with the team and be a future, maybe they try a guy like Pierre-Olivier Joseph out of Pittsburgh or Ville Heinola out of Winnipeg. I don't think those two are guaranteed untouchables right now, and they could be traded for the right price. And I think that if this was to make the Kraken a bit better right now and in the future, it might be a good move for them to do that. So I definitely think, in my opinion, that the Kraken could go after the defenseman this year. I'd like to know what you think, though. Do you think that the Kraken, if they're still in a playoff spot and in a playoff race, come trade deadline time, go after defenseman? And if so, which defenseman do you think would be the best fit in Seattle? And lastly, here with the New Jersey Devils, there have been a lot of talks in the past couple weeks, maybe last month, that the Devils could be big-time players at the trade deadline. There have been talks in the past little while that they could be linked to a guy like Josh Anderson from the Montreal Canadiens, Timo Meier from the San Jose Sharks. To some extent, they've also been maybe mentioned in the trade rumors for Patrick Kane too. I've seen that in places as well. So given the fact that the Devils are really good this year, I would not surprise me at all if they went out and acquired a top 6 forward before the deadline. They have some good players, but while guys like Tatar, Haula, and Wood have done really well in the top 9 and produced great, they're not that next level impact forwards. I know that Palat gets back, he should be able to get in the top 6. He's currently injured right now. But guys like Bratt, Heischer, and Hughes have been leading the charge offensively, and they've had a lot of good depth scoring from their team. But I think if they were to add that one next player to that top 6 and make it really that lethal, I think it's definitely a possibility. I think Meier would be definitely a great addition for them. We know that Meier's a pending restricted free agent with the San Jose Sharks and is due a really big qualifying offer, but the Devils do have cap space, so it wouldn't be too hard to try and acquire a guy like him. You've got Anderson in Montreal. I'm still not sure if Anderson will be traded. I think it's still up in the air. I know there have been a lot of Josh Anderson trade talks, but I still think, in my opinion, that the New Jersey Devils could pull off a trade like that. Pending UFAs, like maybe a Patrick Kane in Chicago or Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis, if they were to waive to go there, maybe those two would be acquisitions in the short term. I think that both players could be had for the right price, especially with Chicago doing really, really poorly this year and St. Louis on the bubble right now. So definitely think that those two could be had for the right price. I even said that one of my best fits for Brock Besser would be the New Jersey Devils, because he has a significant cap hit, but he's a good top 6 forward, and I think the Devils could do that. So definitely think that I would not be surprised at all if the Devils acquired a top 6 forward before the deadline, especially if they continue to play as they have and lead the Metro Division. Definitely something to keep an eye on. I would like to know what you think, though. Do you think that the Devils should go after a top 6 forward near or around the deadline? And if so, do you think they should acquire someone with term, maybe a rental? Who do you think would be the best fit in the top 6 for the New Jersey Devils? So that's all I want to talk about today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will leave a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next week's video. See you guys soon.